I keep forgetting to play either, well, we could play Down the Field, which is traditional, or Taylor Swift in honor of Caleb Calhoun, all for Tennessee, who joins us here. It's Asian House Vols Talk with Caleb Calhoun of All for Tennessee. And, well, theoretically, I suppose, football season has begun. Their August practice underway in Knoxville. When fans go in there, they're all tweeting out what they have seen and all this. You've got your people telling you what's going on there in Knoxville. Caleb Calhoun, what's the report? What are the storylines that you feel are most prevalent from the first days of Tennessee football practice?
Well, there's not much of what I guess you could say we didn't expect to hear. The big things are the biggest questions, I think, for everybody with fall practice right now is, will Trey Smith be good to go, and will Aubrey Sullivan get his eligibility waiver cleared? If those two things happen, no team wants to have the stuff come down to a couple of players in the trenches on either side, but when you're Tennessee and you're still rebuilding, your success can come down to a couple of players on the trenches on either side. And so I think that's a huge deal throughout fall camp. A couple of things minor that stuck out to me, things like Gerard Means working out at defensive back. I was kind of curious about that, particularly given how loaded the Vols are at defensive back.
Yeah.
And so just little things like that, but, nothing too big. The other thing is, I wrote yesterday, and I've been maintaining this. It's just little things, like, you see Juwan Jennings getting the team hyped up. I maintain Juwan Jennings as the leader of the offense right now and not Jared Garantano.
Yeah.
I almost think of it as like I compare it to a Michael Irvin, Troy Aikman situation in Dallas in the early 90s. I always maintained that Michael Irvin was the leader of that offense, not Troy Aikman.
Well, I'll tell you, considering how much the Cowboys got into trouble back in those days, and considering how Troy Aikman, when Barry Switzer came about, was upset that, we're not working hard enough and all that, maybe you're onto something there. However, I did see that and said, wait a minute here. Wide receiver, the leader, over the quarterback? I'm not quite sure that happened with the Dallas Cowboys back in the day. Why do you think it's happening now?
I think right now it's happening because Juwan Jennings is as vocal as anybody on the offense, and he has as much proven production for Tennessee as anybody on the offense as well. The only person that it comes close, we would both agree, probably is Ty Chandler.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of Ty Chandler, Juwan Jennings, he's the only other guy on the offense that can really say he's done it with Tennessee, that he's done it in a big way, in big games, and been part of huge wins, and actually part of a successful team. And I think that as we have all the advanced metrics to show that Jared Garantano was not as bad as he sometimes looked last year,
Mm-hmm.
given how much he was under pressure, how efficient he was. But at the same time, he's still 6-12 as a starter. He still averaged less than 160 yards passing per game last year. So this isn't to say that's all on him, but it is to say that we keep saying, given the support and the help, he can be great. Well, we don't know that yet because we haven't seen it. So I think Juwan Jennings has actually proven he can produce.
I will ask you this. What is your opinion of people that would call Jennings, crazy or a loudmouth? I've seen this on social media, and, it's the way fans talk. But I'm more or less thinking outspoken because, as I've said and we've talked about, when he was suspended, all he was doing was saying things about Butch Jones that every single Tennessee fan was thinking. And, that you're not blindly loyal to a fired coach. I couldn't quite understand that. Do you think that Jennings does get a bad rap and could be a good leader?
I do. I think Jennings is a very emotional player, and we've seen that. He had a couple of off-the-field issues early on.
Sure.
And then he's obviously had a couple of injuries, but then he had that dismissal where he got very emotional. But a lot of times when your vocal wide receiver is your leader, they do tend to be the emotional types and the ones who may have a couple of off-the-field issues and things like that. That's not uncommon. If you go throughout the history of football and look at those really loud receivers, it's not ideal to have vocal wide receivers. And this isn't to say that Jared Garantano isn't vocal, but it's just, I think Jennings has really shown he can be the vocal leader of the team this year. And sometimes that's not a bad thing. The only drawback for this team is that Jennings really isn't the only receiver the Vols are going to be looking at. They are going to be looking at a lot of weapons this year, and you do get concerned when your wide receiver is the most vocal if he starts to get salty about not getting the ball enough. But at the same time, I think that he has shown he can be a leader. He consistently galvanizes Vols fans more than anybody else. So it's really just a matter of what it really shows with the players. But he was always he was very vocal and accepting of being the number 2 receiver to Josh Malone in 2016. And I think there's a good chance he becomes the number 1 receiver this year, even if Marky Calhoun is a little bit better with the ball in his hands. I think Jennings is more of a gamer. So I think he could be a good leader.
Well, you look at, and it seems so long ago because it was like the last significant moment, I think you could say, where you thought, okay, the Vols are elite again. And it was when Jennings caught the touchdown from Dobbs in the last play of the game against Georgia. I mean, now it's even like you look at the schedule, the Vols play Georgia, that's an L and all that. Back then, I mean, you're like, Vols play Georgia. It came back on them last year, can do it again, It was totally a different perception. And so, I mean, but Jennings, we mentioned this before, doesn't it seem like Peyton Manning was throwing to him once upon a time? But the thing was, Jennings was a key contributor when we could actually see that this team was elite, assuming you think number 9 in the country is elite, which is what the Vols were ranked after Jennings caught that touchdown pass back in 2016. And it seems a lot longer ago than that, to tell you the truth. But that's the case here, I suppose. Hey, you mentioned Garland, is he going to be able to play? Is he not? The transfer. I'm looking at people who... Aubrey Solomon, I'm sorry. Thank you. Aubrey Solomon. Solomon, forgive me here. I do this sometimes. I write down the wrong name. Solomon here. What will he give to the defensive line, in your opinion? Assuming that I remember his name correctly, what will Solomon give to the defensive line this year, if he can play?
I think more than anything, just options and power in numbers. I mean, I am a believer that a lot of times you don't know how good players are going to be at the college level, so your ideal situation is to have as many quality players as possible just to increase the likelihood that you find a couple of good ones. And right now, I think Emmett Gooden proved down the stretch of last season he can be one reliable starter at defensive tackle. Jerry Pruitt has gone the junior college route with Daryl Middleton from Last Chance U, Davion Williams, the 4-star junior college transfer. If Aubrey Solomon, who was once a 5-star recruit and played for Michigan and is now transferred to Tennessee, if he gets the green light, well then you've got to think that in power and numbers, it increases the likelihood that one of those 3 guys is able to step in and be the other starter at defensive tackle. And if I'm a coach, I'd much rather be able to pick from one of 3 than one of 2. And so it's just, I am a believer. I think football has shown it that there is power in numbers because it doesn't matter what the star ratings are. You don't know how good they are until they get on campus, and so you need as many bodies as possible so you have options if things don't work out.
Well, what I'm looking to here with Solomon, and I did it again. I once did this with talking about the horse races, and I wrote down Kent DeSormo on my piece of paper, and then I did this again with Garland and Aubrey Solomon here and all this. Anyway, that's enough excuse making. But I had written down that he was a trainer, was DeSormo, which obviously he isn't. He's a jockey. But regardless, so I'm reminded of that I once did. Anyhow, let's get the handwriting right. Let's get it right. And let's ask this of you. I'm reminded of when Trey Smith went down. And, before Trey Smith went down last year, the Vols were a reasonably competitive team, able to beat Auburn. Without him, they're losing to Missouri 50-17, getting blown out by Vanderbilt, and frankly, are kind of fortunate to beat Charlotte. And so that was what one lineman can do and all this. I guess I'm asking, could Solomon have a similar impact on the pass rush? Because we know the secondary is there, but you got to have the pass rush because nobody can cover everybody for eternity. Eventually, somebody's going to get open. What is your thought there? Can Solomon have that kind of an impact, say, on the defensive line that Smith had on the offensive line last year?
Yes, the difference is, given the injuries that hit the offensive line last year, there weren't many, but they were few and far between, but they were key injuries given how thin the Vols were. Smith was really the only guy that was a reliable blocker for the Vols really showed it down the stretch of last year. He struggled a lot early, but he ended up with 7.5 tackles for a loss and a sack as a backup. So he really started to show what he could do. So I think he is at least one known commodity. I think having Aubrey Solomon, though, again, we don't know how good he's going to be yet. You always wonder, why didn't he play more at Michigan, and did they see something that nobody else saw? So, those things do stand out. But you would think that with Solomon there, that just increases the likelihood that Emmett Goods will have another complementary part next to him. And as Tennessee fans know, true defensive tackles that can make a push really help your pass rush more than one. I still remember, maybe I'd have to go back in history, but I argue that the 2001 Vols had the greatest defensive tackle tandem in college football history when they had John Henderson and Albert Ainsworth lining up together. They had no NFL talent anywhere else on the front seven, and they still had the best rush defense in college football that year because of those two guys.
And outside of an upset for LSU, would they have been playing for national title riches, if they had defeated LSU in the SEC title game? There you go. Perhaps the last truly great team that Tennessee had. We're talking to Caleb Calhoun. This is Asian House Vols Talk with Caleb Calhoun of allfortennessee.com, and I think that allfortennessee.com is the best off-season website that you will find about the Tennessee Volunteers with the lists and things like this. But one of the other things I mentioned about this and your coverage is that a lot of guys, I think, who cover Tennessee do it as fans, and so you get, exceedingly apologist articles for a team that's going 5-7 or something like that. I wanted to ask you, and you've written a story about Jeremy Pruitt last week saying, we have the best coaching staff in college football. Now, Chaney, I think you've got big names that can say, hey, we've done it, we can show you how to do it, in Wenke, Rocker, and Martin, obviously. But I guess they haven't done it yet. They haven't come together. You say, what was your thought? What was your thought about Jeremy Pruitt saying, we've got the best coaching staff in college football?
My thoughts are, whether or not that is true from what Jeremy Pruitt has said, it should be a giant red flag for Vols fans for lots of reasons. My first starting point is, I look at, again, I'm not comparing Nick Saban to Jeremy Pruitt. I'm not comparing Jeremy Pruitt to Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, or Urban Meyer, but nobody cared about their staff, those guys' staff members, when they were hired anywhere. And Saban has turnover every year, and it's still elite. Dabo Swinney, Chad Morris was his offensive genius. The year after Chad Morris leaves, he goes to 4 straight college football playoffs. So it's all about the head coach. More importantly than that, Tennessee has a little bit of history when it comes to staff. First off, 2 members of this staff, Jim Chaney and Derek Gansley, were both part of the 2012 staff that went 5-7. Chaney's in the same role that he was on that staff. Now, you can say, yes, Chaney, the offense put up historically great numbers that year, and I'm not here to deny that. But at the end of the day, that staff still went 5-7, running a 3-4 defense, by the way, which Derek Gansley was a part of, coaching the secondary. You can also say that the last time Tennessee really propped up a staff more than anything else, well, there's a couple times. The hire of Lane Kiffin in 2009 was solely about the staff he could bring. Oh, I'm going to bring Marty Kiffin. I'm going to bring Edwards on it. I'm going to bring Lance Thompson. And, of course, he was gone after a year, so that, none of that was relevant or mattered. And then Butch Jones. Butch Jones forced John Jancic out the back door, and we were sold a bag of goods on him bringing in Bob Shoop. And we're realizing now with Shoop at Mississippi State, Shoop is a really good defensive coordinator.
I said it all along. Yes, go ahead. Yes. Absolutely I agree with that. Yes, go ahead.
Right. And so what we're realizing is, a great staff is nice, but it's nothing without the head coach. The head coach can honestly call staff members to look bad, and let's be honest. It's been staff members how many assistants have restarted their careers at another place and looked much better under a different head coach? It happens all the time. Well, I just think that it doesn't matter how good the staff is; it matters how good Jimmy Pruitt is.
It's something that you might want to say after they've actually coached a game together. You know, I mean, to say it now, it's, counting your chickens before they hatch and all that could come back to haunt you. The other thing I wonder is that, let's just say that Tennessee goes 5-7 or 6-6 or something. Is this the opportunity now where it's like, wait a minute, coaches are going to throw the players under the bus? Well, we're the best. You're just not getting it done. I mean, one could kind of see that if it's not just something to throw out there during August, and I do think that a lot of Tennessee fans, I don't know if they'll remember this quote or not. Some they do, some they don't. This. Lane Kiffin, you mentioned him. He remembers Rocky Top. He was playing it at Florida Atlantic practice, I guess, and he doesn't strike me, even if he did name his son Knox, as a real bluegrass-loving guy, Lane Kiffin and all that. What was that all about? You wrote about it. What Rocky Top at Florida Atlantic? What's going on there? It's flat down there.
Well, Lane Kiffin has been throwing shots at the Vols ever since he left in different ways. He's a professional troll along with a head coach. He reminds me of he just dropped out, but Mike Gravel, who's running for president, he ran for president as a troll, just to get on Twitter and take shots at people, and openly said he has no desire of actually winning the nomination.
Mm-hmm.
And I joke about that. And Lane Kiffin is almost like that, it seems like, with college football. I mean, this isn't the first time he's done that. This is a guy who 3 years ago, he managed to take a shot at Tennessee about how Alabama is getting all the top recruits in the state of Tennessee. I mean, he just, every now and when he was at USC, he did this full interview, like, laughing about how Tennessee blames him for all their woes. And I'm like, yeah, Tennessee probably maybe took the blaming Lane Kiffin thing too far, although I maintain, this was when Derek Dooley was head coach, I maintain that the combination of Lane Kiffin and the program kind of falling apart at the end of the former did leave Dooley with the shortest stick ever to compete in the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think Lane Kiffin just, it was humbling when he got fired by USC. Because he was so brash, and I think he still has that arrogance about him. And I think he just likes taking shots at the Vols because it's still a little bit of taste of relevance while he's down trying to build something at Florida Atlantic, and nobody's paying attention. And I mean, you want to talk about selling staff, by the way, I will say Lane Kiffin had a major drop-off this past year at the Kendall Brown Club.
Well, you mentioned staff and what Lane Kiffin said in your previous comments, about how he brought people in and it was also in a way that seemed a little bit sleazy. After he brings in his dad as an assistant, as a coordinator, the Buccaneers fall into the tank. And I remember he said that he brought in South Carolina's best assistant. It was their quarterback's coach, John Reeves. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's one of your in-laws here, Lane. I mean, I think I understand how you got him and all this. And I know Vols fans were eating it up at the time, but there was a bit of a hollowness there. Now, I don't quite get the hollowness from Pruitt that I did from Kiffin and all that. But yeah, I do see that, and I think you make a good point. It's trying to get attention for a program that's always going to be in the shadow of Miami, of even Central Florida and South Florida, if you want to get right down to it, but certainly Florida and Florida State, if not Florida International, because they play in Miami. Atlantic plays in Boca Raton. Where is that again? Is that in the suburbs? Which one? Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach? Which one? So... Anyhow, you just wrote a story, I haven't had a chance to read it, about Thomas Davis, who, veteran NFL player for now the Los Angeles Chargers, used to be the Carolina Panthers, but you don't like the fact that he has gotten on Quavarius Crouch's Instagram and has supposedly trolled him. What is this all about? Why would a three-time Pro Bowler go on the Instagram of a freshman at Tennessee?
Yeah, it's always the most annoying part of college football to me when fans or former players that are graduates of a school, adults in general, take shots at high school kids because of the school they committed to and it wasn't their favorite team. Ole Miss's reaction to Peyton Manning was pathetic. And honestly, Tennessee fans' reaction to Cade Mays committing to Georgia a couple years ago, that was pathetic. I don't think anybody in their right mind should be blaming Cade Mays for committing to Georgia over Tennessee.
I agree.
Given what Tennessee was going through.
Both instances, absolutely, yes.
Right, exactly. And so for Thomas Davis to do it, as a multi-millionaire in the NFL who's a linebacker, was a a little bit of a lower blow. Now, Thomas Davis, I wanted to thank him for a minute. He took a shot at me on Twitter, and he said that it was a joke. People don't he called me a clown in the process, and then said people don't understand our relationship between me and Q, which could make sense because he played for Carolina and Quavaris Crouch is from Charlotte. But then he deleted that tweet. And so I'm thinking, okay, I don't know why he deleted the tweet, but I guess he didn't want to engage in a Twitter war. But at the same time, yeah, none of us know his relationship with him and Quavaris Crouch. We do know that he took a shot at a freshman for a school he's playing at, and joking about his ability to have growth at that school, which is a low blow no matter how you spin it. And when you take it into context of, I've kind of said this before, I remember David Pollack at SEC Media Days last year just going on a rant about Jeremy Pruitt and how angry he was at Pruitt for his relationship with Mark Richt. And then you look at Thomas Davis. I think there was some real residual anger from the 2004 Georgia Bulldogs players who feel like they should have played for the national title, but blew it at home in a game against Tennessee that year when Eric Gaines was a freshman, and Georgia was the better team. But Tennessee just outplayed them that day because Georgia was not taking them seriously, and it wrecked David Green's senior season and what was supposed to be the dream season for the Dogs. And I think a lot of 2004 Georgia players have a lot of residual anger at Tennessee for that.
That's, yeah. And I'll tell you also that in those NFL locker rooms, see, if it was one thing, it was two former pro players trash talking on their colleges on social media. That's one thing. I mean, but I do get 18 years old. He just came in there, and then deleting the tweet like they had a relationship or something like that. Even if they're from the same area, Carolina Panthers, Charlotte, why does he care? I mean, it makes no sense. Anyway, Los Angeles Chargers, I'm going to have to go and reach out to them. They've got Elijah Zeiss as a free agent trying to make that defense along with Davis. You don't know this, but his father is a good friend of mine. He's a columnist for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And years ago at this very radio station, I used to have him come out and interview Heath Schuler. I used to give him press passes for NFL games, and he would interview Heath Schuler and what it was like to try to beat out Gus Frerotte for the starting job of the Redskins and such. He was sort of a personal Heath Schuler reporter was his father, and Elijah. So he'll be trying to make that defense with the Los Angeles Chargers, Paul Zeiss's son Elijah, on the Los Angeles Chargers. He's a free agent linebacker there. So anyway, just something to point out. In our last minute, you do also mention that the basketball schedule is taking shape. We know that their Vols won't be coming to Johnson City, but I do want to ask you just a little bit, what's in store for basketball? What do you think of the big game? How long until this schedule is released, in your opinion?
I'm not sure when the full schedule is released, but I will say the out-of-conference slate does look pretty good when they get to play either Florida State and then VCU or Purdue and just their World Coast Classic, and then you got a bunch of Power 5 games with Washington, Kansas, Memphis. Well, not a Power 5 school like Memphis, but basically one, and then Wisconsin. And then also they get to play Cincinnati on the road this year, which is kind of an intriguing one. I don't know how good Cincinnati will be after the coaching change last year, but that's a bunch of legitimate Power 5 or schools that, even though they're not in the Power 5 conference, are basically college basketball Power 5 schools. So it's an interesting non-conference play, to say the least.
It's Asian House Vols Talk with Caleb Calhoun of All for Tennessee. He is Caleb Calhoun. Read him at allfortennessee.com, because you know why? It's just the best off-season Tennessee website there is. How's that?